Okay, so let's get going now. So I press the record button, so tick, that's the first thing that I as the facilitator need to do. The second one is, of course, to welcome you all to the first of these NESI pre-forum webinars. So we have 12 of these webinars coming up over the next 4 weeks. They're going to be running Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday through until the first week of April. And it's fantastic that we have 2 webinars for each of the 6 tracks that are going to be the focus of the NESI Forum. Just as a reminder, those tracks are sustainable textiles, they are the future of energy, the future of work, and the future of finance, and sustainable housing and the built environment, and lastly, food sovereignty. Okay. My name is Michael Weatherhead. I'm from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and together with NESI, we are putting on the forum in just over a month's time. I just want to give you a little bit of the structure of the next 55 minutes or so, because we're wanting to keep it to the hour for this first of, as I said, 12 pre-forum webinars. So these webinars form the start of a appreciative inquiry arc, or that is the NESI Forum. So in this pre-forum stage, we are, through the webinars, discovering about some of the really interesting work that is taking place across these 6 tracks that I mentioned will be the focus of the conversations at NESI. After the completion of this discovery pre-forum stage, we'll be moving into a dream and design stage, which is the forum itself, the 2.5 days, 24th to the 26th of April. If you haven't already signed up, please do. It's really going to be a wonderful forum. It was 2 years ago in 2017. And then in the post-forum, all of the work that comes out of the forum and what was learned in the pre-forum will be taken forward in a sort of a delivery stage. So there's kind of a 4D arc to this appreciative inquiry process: discover, dream, design, and ultimately do. Okay, but we're at the discovery stage, and for the purposes of this hour, we're going to be discovering a little bit about the sustainable textile space from Lars, and I'll introduce Lars in a second. Lars is going to basically give a short presentation of around 15 to 20 minutes, and then the remainder, the next sort of 25 minutes or so, I'm going to break you into pairs in order to have conversations about this sustainable textile space. Those conversations and the question which I will put into the chat box ahead of putting you into those breakout groups, that question will give you the opportunity to discuss Lars' webinar as well as your own interests in the space. So just as a sort of a point of order, Lars is going to deliver his presentation to us, but if you could take any questions you have into your breakout conversations in pairs, then that will go for about 20-25 minutes, and we'll spend the last 10 minutes together as a group, reflecting both in the chat box and verbally, if you wish to say anything, about those conversations and anything you found particularly of interest with respect to the forum. Okay, we'll also be finishing off this hour just gathering your thoughts as to how we can use what we've learned in this space and take it into the NESI Forum, because the point is to connect what we're doing here with the NESI Forum. But anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lars. And Lars is our first speaker, our first presenter of the 12 webinars we have. Now Lars Mortensen, so the name may give it away, but Lars is Danish, and he is currently working with the EEA. He's an expert on consumption, sustainable consumption and production at the EEA, and really, really interestingly, focusing on sustainability of textiles, plastics, and electronics, really looking at the circular economy here. So Lars, thank you so much for giving up your time to do this presentation. What I'm going to do is hand the floor over to you. I'll keep a little eye on the clock, but as I said, 15 or 20 minutes or so if you can. And then, as I said to everyone, I'll put that question for the breakout conversations into the chat box, and then I'll put you into those chat boxes. But before we get going, any questions on that? Anything about the structure of today? No? Okay, well, Lars, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good to see you all. Thanks for taking an hour in an afternoon here. I will not be talking more than 10-15 minutes, and I look forward to the discussion. I liked your introduction, Michael, about discovering textiles in the circular economy, so that's what we're going to do. So I'll just provide my input to discovering this. I'll just share my slides with you here. Does that work now? Can you see a slide? Yes, all good. All right, so basically, I work at the European Environment Agency. That's the building you can see on your left-hand side. That's an EU institution. I've worked there for 15 years, and I've been working on sustainability for 25 years now in international organizations, doing many things, mostly focusing on consumption and production systems. And at the moment, I'm looking mostly into textiles as a sector and into plastics. I'm an economist by training. So I just wanted to share with you my insights on textiles and the circular economy from the work I've been doing in the past few years. Of course, it's very much about linking the economy and the environment together in a good way to achieve well-being for us all. I'd like to make 3 points basically today. The first point is to show you that the textile system is definitely not sustainable. The second thing I would like to do is to tell you that we need a vision for a circular textiles in a well-being economy. And the third thing is that we need innovation, new business models, and regulation. So I'm just going to take you briefly through those 3 points. So starting on the sustainability point. So just to show you here on this graph, basically, when we talk about textiles, what are we talking about? Most people assume we're talking about clothing and fashion, which is the case, but we're also talking about textiles used for furniture, carpets, linen, curtain, etc. Quite a big industry in Europe, quite a large industry in the world. Basically, this is an industry that creates a lot of jobs, creates a lot of growth in the EU and elsewhere, and is an essential part of our economy. It is an industry which is highly globalized, a lot of production in developing countries, a lot of consumption there and in our countries. The graph you can see on the top here shows the clothing imports into the EU, basically showing the big green dot, which is imports from Asia into Europe. But as you can see, we also export textile clothing out of the EU. We've had a large textiles and clothing industry in Europe in the past, but not as much anymore. Basically, so how does this system, what's the characteristics of it? I would say it's a very, very linear system, not at all circular when you look at it. It's has a lot of different producers and consumers in the value chain, a lot of very, very small producers, and it's quite difficult to regulate. In terms of some of the trends we see, I would say that basically one of the issues we've seen is that actually clothing has become cheaper in recent years, cheaper compared to other goods, basically because as people are getting richer and clothing is a basic good, other things are increasing. We have more money, and the fact that it becomes cheaper means that people can buy more clothing, and it also means that people are actually able to buy clothing, buy cheap clothing, and buy clothing that is used less actually. So basically, to be very direct, you can say that people buy more cheap shit than they should probably do, to be very direct. So what are the impacts on that? Basically, well, you can say that what are the amounts? The amount is that, for example, in the EU, we buy about 19 kilos of textiles per person every year. 70% of that is clothing. There have been projections saying that the consumption of clothing and footwear could increase over 60% in the next 11 years. So quite a lot. You can say that the impacts from textiles is very much embedded in our trade. So, you know, the clothing and the fashion and the textiles consumed in Europe or elsewhere, often the impacts are in the producing countries. There's also a lot of impacts from garbage, of landfilling, incineration, and actually one garbage truck of textiles is wasted every second somewhere. So that's a bit scary. In terms of hotspots, this figure here shows basically a very linear value chain and indicates some of the hotspots and environmental impacts from textiles. As you can see, there's a lot of resource inputs, there's a lot of pressure inputs, we're producing a report right now which will look into certain things, in particular chemicals in the textiles, which we think is a really, really big issue. The water use, how textiles is an enormous contributor to climate change and could actually be an industry that could save carbon, but also a big contributor to microplastics. And this is, of course, in addition to all the social problems that we're aware of in this industry with bad labor conditions, etc. So it's really an industry that needs to be looked at. I would argue that there's a big lack of both circularity and sustainability. This figure is our EA perception of what a circular economy should look like. So it should be not a linear economy, but one that is circular in terms of design, production, and consumption, where as much as possible is reused, repaired, redistributed, and refurbished, and remanufactured in the cycle and used again and again and again. So that's what we'd like to see. But basically, what I've tried to indicate here is that if you first target the design phase, many textiles are basically designed for using for a very limited period. So this is the fast fashion. I mean, very limited. It's in some cases just a few months or a few times. Even we see people buying certain pieces of clothing, using it only once and throwing it out. We see huge social, environmental, and climate impacts from the production of all the numbers we look at. We see a lot of impacts from washing, both in terms of energy and water use, but also in terms of microplastics. We see that the majority is landfilled and incinerated. Some is reused and exported to other countries, but then often landfilled or landfilled after that. You can say that basically textiles is basically about half is based on natural fibers and another half on artificial fibers. So there's a big plastic issue here, and both types of fibers have different problems. A lot of problems with the cotton production, of course, but also a lot of problems and energy use in the production of plastics, for example. And basically, you could say that the share of recycled textiles in any new textile product is very low, because this is really difficult. We don't have what we have to have in place to do that. And what we basically need is we need innovation, we need new business models, and we need also very much a regulation, both at the EU level and at the country level, and of course also something at the global level. So that brings me to the second point, the vision of a circular textiles and a well-being economy. I think it's really important to articulate a vision. What is it we want to achieve here, instead of just pointing at all the problems. And basically, just to start, I would just like to say, from an EU perspective, basically, one of the challenges when we talk about well-being economies, new economies, is that it's the top priority of the European Commission is to create jobs and growth and investment. And especially the growth part can be not always fully in line with the ambitions of creating fully well-being and minimizing the environmental or social impact. At least it's a big challenge. So within the jobs and growth overall goal of the EU and the member countries, we have a circular economy action plan, which is actually one of 5-6 big priorities. So I think that is really good. Within that, we have a product policy in the EU that's the eco-design, everything related to green public procurement, regulating products, which is a whole policy package. And I was very happy to see last week that the Commission has actually articulated now that there will be a focus on textiles in the future. This is an industry which is regulated, but definitely not heavily regulated from an environmental perspective. And there hasn't been much new policies in this area for a number of years. Of course, I would say that textiles also has to be seen in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, where textiles actually contribute to the majority of them. Of course, the sustainable consumption and production, but also the climate change, the energy, but also as a contributor to jobs and growth, etc. So that's where we stand. But then in terms of the vision, I want to show you the picture I showed you before. Basically, what we would like to do? Basically, what we would like to do is we would like to have textiles that are designed for circularity basically from the very beginning. We would like to keep the value of the products and the components in the textiles in the economy to the extent possible. We'd like to have less emissions from all phases, fewer loss of materials, and of course less inputs of new natural resources. The more can be reused and recycled, the less we need to use new materials. And finally, to increase the share of renewable and recycled resources and energy. So that's how if I was to be asked, and I was asked to articulate a vision for a more circular textiles consumption and production system, I would say. I think it's very, very important to look at this from a systems perspective, to see it as a system. How can we change this system in a way, basically, that basically the clothing is something we all wear. It's something, actually, it's illegal not to wear clothing. So how do we want to wear clothing and use textiles, but doing it in a way that it enables our well-being and it doesn't harm the environment and have negative social effects as well. So that brings me to my third and last point. So in order to achieve this vision, what do we need to do? Some people may say, well, it's up to the consumers just to change and everything will be fine. I would say the studies for many, many years shows that this is not the case, basically, that a lot of innovation is needed, a lot of new business models needs to be put in place, but also regulation is needed to enable such a change. This is, I think, the whole vision of circularity is very much a paradigm shift in many sectors that we are seeing started, and we hope to see implemented over the next maybe 10 years or so. In terms of innovation and new business models, I would like to say, when we talk about innovation, and also when we're at the NESI Forum, it's important to talk about technological innovation and social innovation. But this is a given in this context, of course, but often when you talk about innovation, people talk about technological innovation. I think the social innovation is equally important. How groups gather differently, the whole sharing and enabling of new things. In terms of new business models, Luca Kujema and Luca is in the call as well, have been drawing this picture just to illustrate that there are different types of new business models that can help enable a circular economy. The most obvious one is product design. So you design the textiles in a way that it's not too mixed, so that it's easily reusable with materials that can be reused or recycled. But there's of course also the option of providing services of leasing the clothes, for example, instead of selling them. So we see good examples of, for example, in Denmark there is a scheme where you can actually lease baby clothing. So instead of buying clothes for your baby, you basically purchase access to it. So you purchase a basket of baby clothes from 0 to 3 months, and once the baby is 3 months, you get a new one, the next size, and the clothing is reused and washed, and it's of very high quality. There's a lot of these examples now coming up, also with ski wear and with other things, with dresses, etc. This is also part of the whole collaborative consumption and sharing scheme. This whole movement towards that, which is also happening very slowly in the textiles area. Then we have the issue of prosumers. Basically, when a consumer becomes a producer, this is very much, when you redesign your clothing and sell it to others and all these things. There's a lot of trends in that direction. There's a lot about consumer choice influencing, basically, of course, marketing, but also the clothing. How do you make the more sustainable clothing? Where is that made available on the website or in the store is kind of a big deal in terms of how much it's sold. And then there's a whole textiles as a resource, which is of a new business model in itself. Basically, you need a lot of businesses that live on using the materials from textiles to create new textiles and to use them again and again and sharing. So these are some of the types of new business models you need. But to enable that, and that brings me to my last slide, you definitely need regulation. The trends in the past basically shows that if you leave it up to the consumers to change, then there are some segments of population who are willing to do that, and more, you can say, in some cases. There's a huge lack of information. There's a lot of pricing issues, a lot of social issues in this. So my judgment is, if you don't put the policies in place, you're not going to make it happen. And what are the things you can do? Basically, one of the things you can do is green public procurement. So the more the governments and the local authorities actually buy themselves sustainable textiles, they buy a lot of bed linen, for example, a lot of curtains, a lot of basically what you call uniforms for nurses and everything. A lot of that. If that happens, then you can actually create a market also for the reused and recycled textiles. Another thing you can do is ask for extended producer responsibility. One country in Europe, France, has an extended producer responsibility for textiles, so that the producer of the textiles, the company selling the textiles, actually has a responsibility for taking it back, or for ensuring it takes back. Then you have, in the EU, we have an eco-design directive, which could be extended to cover issues like that. The labeling is a big issue. Basically, I think we could all agree in this room, most of us would probably buy textiles that are labeled sustainable, but if we knew which were the labels to look for, and even I get extremely confused, and there's many labels and no consistency in it. And then the last thing you can basically do is, of course, economic instruments, and you could have VAT rates that were different depending on the sustainability. You could put taxes on. You could subsidize certain issues. So there's quite a lot of opportunities. So with that, Michael, that was my take at discovering textiles in the circular economy. So we're a small group of people here today, so I'd be quite keen to hear what everybody else thinks, and what are the elements I've missed, what can we discuss further, etc. And also if there are questions, and I would be very happy to answer those. Thank you.
Sorry, take myself off mute. Thank you so much, Lars. And you're correct, actually, we are a relatively small group. So can I ask you just quickly to stop sharing your screen, and then that way I can just check in how many there are of us.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So good. We are fine. There's 9 of us, actually, which works very well. When we break into groups, we're going to be going in pairs. And as the facilitator, the host, I'm not going to be going into one of those pairs. So there's 8. So that's very good. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to just drop into the chat box here firstly, however. This is the question that we're going to be asking each other when we go into pairs in the breakout groups. And I just wanted to give people 2 seconds to have a look at that and see whether or not that might actually allow sort of some of those thoughts to take place, or those questions to arise in the smaller pairs before coming back to you, Lars. I think it might. So my proposal is, unless anyone else vehemently disagrees, is that I break you into pairs now, and we're going to take 20 minutes for this, okay? You're going to take 10 minutes, one person responding to that question and the other one listening. And then what I'll do is I'll send you a little message just saying, if you haven't switched already, switch now, just to remind yourself, so you don't need to keep a check on the clock. To switch around and do the reverse. So it's both a case of listening and learning as well as sharing, okay? And then what I'll do is give you a heads up that I'm going to be closing those breakout rooms down. We'll come back to this main room and share some of those reflections, and perhaps that's where some of those questions will come. One lucky person, and it's going to be a lottery, will get to share that breakout space with Lars, so they can flood him with questions in addition to listening to that particular question I've posed. But I don't have control, or I do have control, but I'm not going to divvy it up. I'm going to just hit the automatic option. So without further ado, then, as I said, 20 minutes, 10 minutes listening, then switch around, 10 minutes listening. I'll close it down, bring us all back together, and then we can share our reflections on this question, okay, the one that I've added into the chat box. That is going to follow you into that breakout room, so you're not going to lose that question. So, okay, any questions before I drop you into your No? Okay, fine. So let's put you into 4 rooms, which should mean everyone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It should all be fine. So I'll see you guys in 20 minutes. Luca, you just need to click accept to go into the room.
I cannot see any message.
That's weird. Can you hear, Luca, can you get it? Can you not sort of jump into the room?
I cannot see where I should click.
Oh, okay.
Should that be in the chat or?
I'm not sure. Gosh, everyone else, it must have flashed up for everyone else. Oh, how do we get you in? Because Jack is stuck in, oh, I don't know, crikey. How do I do this? Tell you what, do you want to jump off the call and jump back on?
Okay, I can do
And then
that.
I'll see if I can then get you back in.
Okay.
This is weird, Luca. It's not allowing me to put you into a chat room. So you know what I'm going to do? I don't know how to do this, but I suppose there's always going to be a problem with the first time round. Do you mind jumping off the call? And what I can do is send you a message when everyone's come back. Otherwise, it's going to be quite boring. Or you and I can have a chat for the next 20 minutes.
Sure.
Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to move Jack into one of the, okay.
Okay, so just wait for your message.
No, what I had to do was I had to move, so you were going to be paired with Jack, and Jack, hold on, Jack, I've moved you into a three-way conversation. Good. One sec. Okay, so sorry about that, but that's an interesting learning. So anyway, how are you doing, Luca?
I'm fine, thank you. It's,
are you sitting in the opposite office next to Lars, or?
No, not at the moment, but he will come, he will move office and he will be here on Friday because there was a reorganization, so I moved a couple of weeks before him.
And remind me again, how long are you with the EEA?
It's been a year and some months now, and I'll be physically here until September, and then I'll have another year of research contract still with the EEA, but I will be back in Dublin.
Oh, okay. Very good. Hey, have you nailed down your flights yet for Nessie?
Yeah, I'm fine. I have accommodation and flights and everything is sorted because I will be traveling.
What time are you coming in? Do you know that? I'm just sort of starting to collect actual flight times from folk.
I'm not flying directly to Malaga. I'm flying like a couple of weeks before in Lisbon, and then I travel for a while, and then I will be in Malaga. But I will let you know when I'm in Malaga.
Okay, so that's easy. So you'll be around the day before. We might have a bit of a sort of a group conversation in the evening before, just to make sure everyone is happy with their roles.
Yeah, I'll be there one day before, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, that's cool.
How's it going with the preparation?
It's going well, I think. I mean, we will be reaching out to you in the next week or so. Anna, hello? Hello, is that Anna? Is that an Anna? Anna, I think you might be on mute or... Not sure. Anna is unassigned. Hello, Anna, can you hear me okay? I'm not sure which Anna this is. Assuming you can hear me, Lars has given his presentation and people have broken into groups to have group conversations. So unfortunately, I don't have a group that I can put you into at the moment because they've already begun those conversations. So you're welcome to stay on this call. In about 15 minutes or so, we will reconvene as a whole group. But in the meantime, it's just Luca and myself. Okay, anyway. You know what was strange, Luca, was actually when you came back on the call, you didn't appear in the list of names to assign.
Yeah, maybe it's, I don't know if that might be the issue, but I'm not using the app. I'm joining through the browser because I'm not allowed to open the installer here.
I wonder if that
but
is...
I can fix that. I can fix that with the IT guys here.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
No, well, it's an interesting thought. I mean, this is the first of 12 webinars, so we have 11 more, and this problem could come up. You know, there's always issues that you don't necessarily anticipate ahead of time. So
sure.
Anyway. But yes, no, the planning's going well. Sorry, Luca. And I was saying that we'll be reaching out to you, plus all of the others who are kindly giving of their time as content contributors to each of the tracks in the next few weeks. So, i.e., we will be having a sustainable textiles conversation to talk through the different sessions and what it means for the role that you'll be playing, etc., etc. Okay?
Okay, yeah,
so
perfect.
You'll see a doodle in the next few weeks. So.
Cool.
Okay, I think I'm going to give them a 10-minute warning. So, folks. Okay. And you're all still alive.
Oh yeah.
That was difficult.
We didn't want to come
That
back.
transition was tough.
That was
right.
a totally unnerving experience, putting your just hoping that it was working and you weren't sort of off in the ether somewhere. Okay, listen, this is the first webinar, so a couple of things which are important to check in with you about. Firstly, the reason why we're having these interviews is because the very nature of the forum is about working together, not just listening to. So we wanted that to be replicated in these webinars as well. Yes, you get a chance to listen to the wonderful Lars, but also we recognize that there is an awful lot of interest, knowledge, abilities in the group, and we want everyone's all of that to come out. So that's why we have those conversations. As a second quick question, I suppose, before we get into reflections is, did that feel like about the right length of time, or was it a bit short or too much time?
Short. It's always short.
Always too short. I had been told that that would be too short a time, but I wasn't. I'm going to blame Lars for taking so long.
I thought it felt okay actually, but I think the time was perfect.
Not too bad. Okay, great. Well, listen, while I'm recording this, that's right, I'm recording this. Also, we can save the chat. And it's really important because, as I said, over the course of these 12 webinars, we do want to capture and take into the forum that which was discussed here. So in addition to feeling free, and I'm going to stop talking in a second, I promise, verbally putting it out there, some of what came out of your discussion, feel free to write it into the chat box for everyone as well, because that way we can save the chat and then Maria and I can have a look over that as well. But anyway, enough from me. Anything that came out? I mean, if I look at the last bit of the question, given what you have learned, heard about sustainable textiles, what questions do you now find yourself facing that you would like to talk about with others at the forum? Does anyone have burning questions which have emerged?
I think, sorry.
I
think my question would be, how do we recover local production is one of the questions.
I'm just going to add it to the chat box, so I've captured and saved it there. Thank you.
I like Celeste to bring up the last thought that you shared with us. I thought it was a really good one. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I am living in Canada right now, and I thought that it's a great thing that we recycle a lot, but I think the main point for the government should be focused on reducing and reuse instead of recycling. So how the governments are seeing this problem? Are they more focused in recycling? Is like that in all over the world?
Thank you. Yeah.
Maybe if I can come in with one thing. I think what we discussed, Sasha and I, we actually agreed that I was going to come and visit him and have a beer because it looks so wonderful down where he is. But I think being in my office here, I think it's just providing, just enabling maybe the sharing and of textiles and reusing in both in small communities and in big communities is a big challenge. I would say this is something that we discussed, that if you want to reuse and share, it's often very difficult to find out actually how to do it.
I must say, I do find that a little bit more here living in Spain, Lars, than I do in the UK, for example. It's a bit more of an effort to find where clothes can be recycled or what different pathways, second lives they can go on.
And just because of when you mentioned that, I share with Jack and Celeste, one of the things that hit me after my years traveling, when I came back to Spain, is that there is a cultural aspect that, at least in my country, you need to take it into consideration, and maybe it happened in other countries, and is the fact that using secondhand or recycling or reusing or buying secondhand clothes is considered like you are the poorest and the worst, and like your life is probably miserable for you to be buying that. So there's this cultural assumption that it doesn't facilitate that part of the that aspect.
I mean, on on a slightly morbid but slightly amusing note, I learned from someone the other day the way to get around that is to go to secondhand clothing stores in communities with relatively wealthy but quite old communities, because people die quite a lot there, and they're really quite nice clothes get put. No, really, someone turned up with this incredibly smart tweed jacket, and I said, "Where did you get that from?" He said, "Go to Berwick. That's where all the rich old people live." So just a little handy hint there for you. Other ones, you can just go to posh parts of London where you can find really smart clothes, because posh people tend to get rid of their very smart clothes on a regular basis. Anyway, sorry, I jest, but only slightly. Any other reflections from your conversations? Oh, we've had an offer to show us around those types of shops in Glasgow.
Great.
Well, okay, so here's a question to anyone. As I said, we do need to try and take what comes out of these webinars into the forum, because of course not everyone who attends the forum will attend these webinars, and we want those who are attending the forums to be able to connect and in some way learn a little bit what took place in these webinars. From your conversations or any ideas that you have, can you think of any interesting way that we might capture what we're recording at the moment, but we're obviously not going to put video tapes of webinars up, how we can communicate that message to the forum participants?
I have a bit of a crazy idea, if you don't mind, Michael.
Crazy ideas, that's very well.
I think that's often the best way to discuss this is also to experience. One option could be to say that if, for those who are following this track, that maybe each of us could bring 3 pieces of clothing that we don't want to use, but which we think is really nice, and then we can. I thought that might be fun. That could be at least a very much an icebreaker in the discussion. No, it's just one item or something.
Yeah.
So, okay, so bring an old piece of clothing. If you think you're going to be on the sustainable textiles track, bring an old piece of clothing that you may want to sort of build a story around in terms of how it can be reused,
or that you think somebody else would be happy with,
Yeah.
So that on the second day, maybe I'm wearing Anna's sweater and she's wearing my shirt,
Exactly. Yeah.
Fun.
Wow, you are going sharing economy full on. Okay.
We're so into it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. No, not a crazy idea, because experiential. It is meant to be experiential as well. This, when you come, if you haven't bought your ticket, do buy a ticket. The central patio is going to be converted into the 2030 future that we all hope and we will reach, with sort of a part related to housing, textiles, food, banking. It's going to be really, really good. So something like that is not a crazy idea by any stretch, Lars.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, Celeste.
Yeah, Celeste, true. I see a lot of that where I live in Spain here, that the default is to go and send it to an African country, which will then cripple their own sort of fledgling textiles industry. Yeah.
So there is I think Lars mentioned in his presentation something about the materials. If they're too mixed, the materials, then they're more difficult to be recycled or reused.
Yes.
So I think there is that kind of information. Ever since I understood that, I don't buy anything that is mixed, especially with metal. So I think that's also a push, and I know we can't push it to the consumers. That's what Sarah has been discussing mainly. It's not only the consumers, and you also said, but having an understanding of what helps recycling versus not would be really good.
I agree, Maria. Yeah, that's a really good one.
Well, any other really good ones? Because we've just got a minute or so before the hour is up.
I put it in the chat because we had lots of things. I've just been putting them.
So capture that for posterity then.
Yeah.
Fashion is very.
So I just put something in the chat. I don't think it's kind of more in idea land than in practicality land, but I just was thinking about how fashion trends are so circular. Like what was in 20 years ago comes back 20 years later, and but then none of the actual clothes. So we keep producing more and more, even though we're modeling everything off of what was in style before. So
no, that's a good point. When you get to a certain age, you do wrap around and come around the second time and go, wow, I bought those 25 years ago. You know.
So maybe we should have like banks of clothing, you know, that saves these fantastic things for 20 years until the next round of fashionable jeans comes around or whatever it is. Huh?
That's it. That's it. It gets called a museum until suddenly the contemporary gets put up on the doorway. It's back in fashion again. Wonderful. Well, listen, folks, thank you very much for your time on this call. It was the first one, a little bit experimental. Jack, thank you for being gate crashed into someone else's conversation. For some reason, we couldn't get Luca in, so we're learning with our technical issues, but appreciate you guys going into a 3 conversation. But otherwise, just to remind you, this is, as I said, the first of 12. The next 2 are in Spanish. We're doing some in Spanish, some in English. We're making sure that all of the 6 tracks have 1 in Spanish, 1 in English. Or I think there might be slightly more in English. I'm not sure. I need to check. But you can check as well, though, on either the wellbeingeconomyalliance.org website or the New Economy Forum, the NESI website as well. And sign up, which I realize now also is in Spanish. So, hey, if you don't speak Spanish, at least you're learning a sign-up process in Spanish.
Exactly.
So listen, thank you again for your time. I will press save chat saved, and stop recording, and wish you all a really nice afternoon, and hopefully see you on maybe some of these future webinars, if not at the forum itself. Bye for now.
Great.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you all.
Nice
Bye.
meeting you all.